Good evening, folks. This is Alexis reporting to you live from Channel 2 Sabherwal News, following our lead reporters on the investigation of the rodents inhabiting the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. These rodents, scientifically known as Cyrus parvis and Cyrus magnum, have been the focus of a study and recovery plan by the Department of Nature and Island Resources of the West Indies. To help boost the St. Kitts population with Nevis, the two separate populations of rodents are nearly identical. But even with the help of scientists, the recovery plan to stabilize the population did not succeed. Now on to our reporter at the scene, Adif.
Here I have with me a scientist associated with the recovery program. Glad to have you here, Aaron.
Glad to be here.
So from what I know, the recovery program was taken into action to attempt to save the population of the rodents on St. Kitts. Animals from Nevis were brought into the St. Kitts population to bolster the population numbers, ensure the availability of mates, and increase the genetic diversity within the shrinking population. So why exactly didn't the recovery program work?
Well, what we figured out from the recovery program is that these two rodents are actually two entirely different species. We believe that originally these two species of rodents were actually one rodent, and over time, through a process called allopatric speciation, they became geographically isolated. You see, while we were researching the area around the West Indies, we found out that there was a potential land bridge that existed millions of years ago, connecting the two islands and acting as a mode of transportation to get from one to another. Due to global warming, the land bridge was covered as a result of glaciers melting and rising sea levels. The one species was split into two different populations, each living on one island. With no ability to interbreed, these rodents were reproductively isolated and were the victims to prezygotic isolation. That is to say, because they could not mate and interbreed. With that isolation, they each adapted to their unique environments. Over the course of many generations, each population of rodents evolved independently, resulting in two different species of rodents, a product of macroevolution, when one species can't recognize the other.
Wow, what a story. How very interesting.
Also, as a result of allopatric speciation, genetic drift occurred. There was a much larger population of rodents on St. Kitts, and their genetic composition was constant, while the genetic composition of the smaller population on Nevis was changed extraordinarily. In fact, I have a rodent from each of the islands with me right now for you.
I've noticed that the St. Kitts rodent has a much longer limb length than the rodent from Nevis, and it looks a lot faster too. Is there any reason as to why that is?
Well, you see, there is actually. Occurrences, like I mentioned earlier, are very likely in smaller populations, such as the one on Nevis, due to the fact that a certain gene can be easier to be lost because there are simply less animals to reproduce with. For example, with the rodents on Nevis, a longer limb length and faster speed for the rodents was lost. That gene that contributed to that was lost because the chance of the gene being carried to future generations was reduced drastically.
Yeah. So human influence on the island has been influencing the rodent population due to the loss of land and apparently less people on Nevis than St. Kitts.
Well, due to environmental loss and food shortages, the rodents weigh less and have a shorter length. They stand at a mere 83 grams and 21.8 centimeters. The St. Kitts rodent has evolved to be much faster, instead, because of the stressful conditions of constant predators, sparse hiding places, and little food. With that lifestyle, their longer limbs provide a faster average speed. Their faster courtship rituals and gestation period allow for a greater number of offspring, which greatly increases their survival.
So, is there anything in store to save the lives of the rodents since the recovery program didn't work?
Well, yes. So far, we have been holding some of the rodents from St. Kitts in captivity, where the environment is much more suitable for living, and the reproduction rate has skyrocketed. We hope to take this into action for all of the rodents, but just in case that doesn't work, we have another alternative. Environmental destruction is a big reason why the rodents fail to reproduce successfully. So we're making a deal with some of the St. Kitts government to get rid of a portion of their sugar plantations and designate it as a home for the rodents. These are sure to be successful.
Amazing. Thank you so much once again for being here today, Aaron. Now, passing it back off to Alexis.
Wow. Well, it looks like a lot has taken place on these small islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. A whole story initiative dedicated for the preservation of these tiny animals. Well, that's it for today, folks. A story of the endangered rodents' survival continues.